I'm glad you're here. I say it. I've been saying it. I think you're here on purpose, for a purpose. And I love VBS stories because they always reflect that, especially with our young ones. So let's talk. Let's see if we can discover some of that this morning. We're finishing this series called Lies Christians Believe, and it did come from a book that a buddy of mine wrote called 9 Common Lies Christians Believe. If you don't have a copy on Amazon, buy a copy, write him a nice review. He'll love you for it. When I started this series, though, a couple of weeks ago, I made this original statement to you. I kind of positioned you this way. I said that, our behaviors most of us, our behavior should originate from our beliefs, right? That's what we want to have happen, that our beliefs will influence our behaviors. We hope in life that's how we live. That's what we strive for. So if your beliefs are off, right? Like whether it was intended that way or not, whether somebody just intentionally told you a lie, tried to mislead you, or you believed something, it was just a little off, you just didn't know that you didn't believe the right thing. What will happen with us, though, is when our beliefs are off, our behaviors are not going to be what we think they should be. So we're going to experience some frustration, some tension within ourselves at the very least. At the very worst, what happens? We can hurt others. Our beliefs, when they spark some bad behaviors, they will hurt other people. You do not have to go far to see that in this world, right? So I said, let's dismantle some of these lies. And we've been digging in, and I know some of these lies, they're well-intentioned. Like some of these lies have been things that we say just to comfort people. Remember the lie? Oh, when somebody passes, you say something like, oh, well, God gained or heaven gained another angel today, right? And that we dismantle that whole thing, and we say it, and I probably said it in my youthfulness, trying to comfort somebody, but it's misleading. It's not true. So regardless of why we say them, they will mislead somebody, and we want to take those lies apart. So we've been pulling this stuff down, trying to work around some of the confusion, try to get through some of the misunderstandings. And I think just one more VBS story to articulate why it's so important, right? Because this past week, Rachel, one of our children's ministry directors, her son, 2 sons were having a conversation. Now, they're both young, okay? And Logan, the older one, says to the younger one, Carter, he says, Carter, this year you get to go to Vacation Bible School. He's so excited for his little brother. He says, you get to go. And you know what? The best part is you get to go to the bounce house and you get to have slushies. I am so glad that he did not lie to his little brother, because we have bounce houses and slushies this year. So last lie we're going to look at, though. Last lie, and I think it is probably one of the biggest lies in Christianity. Okay, and I think it's crept into a bunch of our lives. I think it's crept into our churches, and it's this, that God just wants me to be happy. God just wants me to be happy. Now, this week I was writing this, and I'm thinking to myself right now, somebody's thinking, wrong day to come. Like, I should have slept in, we should have gone to the pool, we should not have come, because the preacher's getting ready to hit us with how unhappy we should be in life. So I'm going to own that. I know you're thinking that. Now, if you'll just hang with me, I think this may go a different direction than what you might have imagined. God just wants me to be happy. 2 extremes with this lie. The first extreme is this, that on one end of the spectrum, what you get when you believe this is that my life is the only thing that's important. My happiness is only about me. That if something comes into my life, something comes into my world, and it doesn't make me happy, I should get rid of it. And I've even heard this, and Shane writes about it in the book, but I'm telling you, if you've been a pastor, if you've worked with couples, I hear this, and listen to me, okay? No judgment intended. We are a room full of broken relationships, and if you haven't had a busted marriage, you have a very close friend who's had a busted marriage, so we get it around here. But I've heard this statement so many times when it comes to couples, where we get engaged in fights, and even husbands and wives, and we'll think to ourselves, well, God just really wants me to be happy. My spouse just needs to fall in line with that. That is one extreme of this argument. Some of you are giggling because you've had that conversation recently, right? That's one extreme. That my happiness is about me, right? The other end of the spectrum is the spectrum that probably now you're thinking, I want to stay in bed this morning, is that for some reason, we've come to believe that if that is a lie, what I said, God just wants me to be happy. If you know that's a lie, then what you're going to hear me say this morning is that I really shouldn't even be happy, that God doesn't care about my happiness. I see this, I hear this all the time. In fact, I have a picture of what this looks like in the church. Put my picture on the screen here. This is what this looks like in the church. Now, if you don't know this, this cat is more famous than me, which is hard to believe. This cat has way more Instagram followers than me. This is Grumpy Cat. And Grumpy Cat, I understand, might have died recently. I don't know if that, I'm seeing yes, he did. Okay, my Instagram people are correct. The social media has me on track. Grumpy Cat died. But we don't know if this cat's really grumpy, but this cat is born with a face that looks like he was sucking on lemons since the day he got here. If this other extreme is true, and God doesn't really care about my happiness, I think we see that in a lot of people who profess to be Christians, profess to follow Jesus Christ, but this is what they look like all the time. And it turns up in our responses too. I actually found some responses because I call them, and I got this from an author, John Acuff, I call them Jesus jukes, but those answers sometimes, the way we talk to people, will let them know what we think about happiness in life. And a Jesus juke is one of those phrases where if you're familiar with football, I know most of you are not because this is Dallas, but if you're familiar with football, yeah, I know that was low. We're hoping for a better year. If you're familiar with football, and a runner's running down the field, and he kind of gives a little juke, he gives a little side move or a stutter step or something to what? Get the tackler to miss him. We do this in our faith. And on this end of the spectrum, if we think that God really doesn't care about our happiness, you know what we do? We make little biting statements to try to reflect that we're more spiritual. Let me show you some of these statements because people put these up out in front of their churches. Look at this one. This one says, if you don't like the way you were born, try being born again. Now, if I'm driving down the road and I don't feel good about myself, that sign's not going to help me. I'm sorry. That's a Jesus juke. It doesn't help me. Look at the next one. A bad attitude is like a flat tire. You won't go anywhere until you change it. Okay, every parent in here, please do not write this down and start using it this week. I know summer has just started and you've already got kids with bad attitudes at home maybe. Don't use this. It's a jab. It doesn't help the situation, doesn't help the conversation. Last one. This one above and beyond the others is one I don't like. Don't say you'll go to jail over your faith when you won't even go to church for it. Okay, just total confession. I don't like this one because every Saturday night I feel like posting it. All right, it's just in me. Just so you know, your pastor stoops that low sometimes in his heart. It's just a jab. Jesus jukes. It's not that there isn't any truth in them. It's just that the way we try to convey the truth, it has a biting manner to it. We take little moments that are happy moments in life or things that might represent a certain amount of happiness, and what do? We try to steal the joy out of them because we try to make a statement. We think we're helping people and we're not. Two extremes. My happiness is only about me, or God doesn't want me to be happy at all. Here's the lie. God just wants me to be happy. Let's go to Mark chapter 8. Grab your worship flyer if you've got it. Grab your iPhone, however you get to the scriptures this morning. If you've got a hard copy, I love that you carry a hard copy. Please carry a hard copy. Get a hard copy. Read the Bible. Mark chapter 8. We're going to look at a story. Jesus is in the middle of a section where here's what we know. Mark is the shortest book of the Gospels. So this account that Mark wrote of Jesus' life is very short and to the point. And in chapter 8, he starts by talking about how Jesus has fed thousands of people with just a little bit of food. This big miracle happened. Then he talks about how he healed a blind man. Then he starts talking about this teaching that Jesus is starting to do, this instruction that he's giving the crowd. And look what it says in verse 34. And calling the crowd to him, Jesus, with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Couple things to note real quick. There are two different groups in this crowd. One group is a curious group. They don't profess to follow Jesus. Maybe a friend, a neighbor brought them to hear this guy speak on a hillside. Maybe they brought him and said, hey, he's going to do crazy miracles. We saw him heal a blind guy. Maybe somebody drug him and said, let's go. Last time we went, he fed 4,000 people with 2 fish, and it's all good, man. We can get a free meal out of the deal. Whatever. There's people that are curious in this crowd, and they're just there because they're curious. They're trying to figure it out. There's a second group. It says Jesus called to him his disciples, with his disciples. There's people who follow him already. The group that's committed to him. They have faith in him. See, they would have understood that a disciple in their culture is somebody who is a student, a learner, somebody who is committed to being like the teacher, like the rabbi. And if you're a disciple, you would follow very closely the actions, the attitudes, the conversation, everything about the rabbi, the teacher, because you would know that your job as a disciple, as a student, is to be more like that person. To be a disciple of Jesus is to give all this weight and authority to him in your life. And look what he does. The first thing he says to this audience, he says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself. Self-denial. If you want to be a disciple, if you want to be a follower, if you want to be a student of Jesus, you have to deny yourself. You have to begin to consider your actions. You have to consider the things you live for, the things that you put into your life every day. And you have to ask yourself, is this what the master would do? Is this what the master would have in my life? Is this what Jesus would want from me? And then you have to begin to look at your life and go, am I like the master? Am I loving God with my heart? And am I serving others? Is this how I invest my time? Self-sacrifice, right? The reason you said, oh, maybe I should stay home today. Now you're starting to squirm on that one. Self-sacrifice is the mark of a Christian, of a follower of Jesus, of a disciple. It is the hallmark. It is the thing that sets apart that we're disciples, we're students of Jesus Christ, that we sacrifice our lives, we give everything over to him, give him all full authority, and then begin to follow him and live a life that reflects that we have done so. Eventually, in Mark and the other three Gospels, Jesus is going to do what? He's going to lay his life down. He's going to surrender his life. He's going to be beaten and tortured and spit upon. They're going to mistreat him. They're going to give him an unfair trial. They're going to make fun of him. They're going to call him names. But he's going to surrender his life on his own. That's our master. That's who we say we serve. See, if you call yourself a Christian, it's not because you actually got up and came here this morning. That doesn't make you a Christian. Attending any church doesn't make you a Christian. Wearing the t-shirt doesn't make you a Christian. Belonging to a gym doesn't mean you're in shape, right? Anybody still paying those gym memberships? It doesn't mean that you're going to be naturally in shape. An encounter with Jesus is to surrender our lives and follow him. That's how we become a disciple. It's a rechecking of our passions. It's a consideration of where we put the authority of our life. So the whole myth that Jesus just wants me to be happy, can I tell you something? What time is it? 10:50. We can debunk that myth with this one passage. Here it is. Write it down. God doesn't just want me to be happy if my happiness is anchored in myself. God doesn't just want me to be happy if my happiness is anchored in myself. Your focus, if it's only on you, if it's only what you want in life, it's only what I want in life, that's not a disciple. That's not a follower of Jesus. My measure of my happiness cannot just be all of these external circumstances. When they go my way, then I'm happy. When they don't go my way, then I pray to God. Anybody have that this past week? I was on the way to church here this morning. And I've had car trouble twice this week. Thought I had it fixed. I'm halfway to church. Car overheats. Pull over. Got to call my wife. She was still asleep. I won't tell off on her though. When the circumstances don't go your way, what happens? I got to be honest. Normally in my life, that's the kind of thing that will just set me off. Because I don't like that kind of stuff. Right? I bet you don't like that kind of stuff. If your life is weighted, if you're influenced heavily by all of these external circumstances, then happiness is going to be really hard to attain. And can I tell you something? Here's what your prayers are going to look like. You're always going to be asking God for more and more things to go right and go well. It's completely self-centered. That is not the mark of a disciple. It's not the mark of somebody who follows Jesus. God doesn't just want me to be happy, especially if my happiness is anchored in myself. Following Jesus requires denial of self. It requires a self-denial every day we get up, to count the cost, to weigh it out. God doesn't just want me to be happy if my happiness is anchored on all the circumstances that are just simply trying to make me happy within myself, within my world. And listen, I'm tempted to just leave the sermon right there. I'm tempted at 10:52 to just go, look, that's the guts of this thing. But I do think there's one more step we need to take. Because I do think this idea that, okay, well then maybe God doesn't want me to be happy still weighs in our minds a lot. So here's the question. Is it wrong to be happy in life? Is it wrong? See, when I go out and I start reading, and I think there's a lot of well-intentioned bloggers and authors and even pastors and theologians, I think they're well-intentioned and they try to explain this stuff in a way that makes it easier for us to follow Jesus. But I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't know that some of the discussion about happiness helps. Let me give you an illustration. I pulled up a quote from an author, blogger. And here's what he said when he started talking about joy and happiness and the difference between the two. He said, joy is something entirely different from happiness. Joy in the biblical context is not an emotion. There's a big difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is an emotion and temporary. Joy is an attitude of the heart. If you've heard something similar to this, if you've heard something like this before, raise your hand. If you've kind of heard this conversation, that joy is like eternal, like it's godly, happiness is earthly, it's no good. Okay, yeah, you can put your hands down. I think most of us have heard this conversation, and it seems really deeply spiritual. Like, and it almost kind of makes sense, and it kind of delineates that there is a difference in how we experience these emotions. But can I tell you something? The problem is when you start to investigate the actual words. Even in the scriptures, when you get into the scriptures and you look at the words, it's not that clean. Happiness and joy are not separate like this. If you go to the Evangelical Dictionary of Theology, which everybody has on their bookshelf at home, I know. If you go to the Evangelical Dictionary of Theology and you look up the word happiness, do you know what you're going to see? You're going to see this. See joy. And you go to joy, you know what you're going to read? Look on the screen. You're going to love this. Happiness over an anticipated or present good. I love that. Keep going. On the spiritual level, it refers to the extreme happiness with which the believer contemplates salvation and the bliss of the afterlife. I love that quote. I love that quote. God just wants me to be happy. You know what the danger is in that lie? Is that we've kind of conjured up this separation with these emotions, and we've tried to make one more spiritual and one more earthly. And the real problem is that eventually we anchor whatever our definition is in this world. Look what he says. It refers to the extreme happiness with which the believer contemplates salvation. In other words, you anchor happiness, you anchor joy in considering salvation, what Christ did for you at the cross, what is coming to us, what has been gifted to us, eternal life starting right now by Jesus Christ for those who have accepted that through faith. The anchor is in this act, this person, not in myself. And when you think about that, you start to understand that there's a difference between how you experience joy and happiness in this life and the next life, right? Because you can have some very earthly things that happen and they're good and they're fun and there's nothing wrong with them. But what do you do when you have bad days? See, the things that carry you through on the bad days are anchoring your happiness and your joy in the future, in what's been gifted to you through Jesus Christ. Followers are to anchor anchor our happiness, anchor our joy, not in these external circumstances, the things that go wrong when my car blows a radiator hose or overheats or whatever. I'm not anchoring all of my happiness and all my joy in those external circumstances. I'm anchoring it in the person of Jesus Christ. And that means I do have to deny myself. I do have to get past the things that aren't so fun in life sometimes. There's a parable in Luke that I want to run to because I love how it plays this whole thing out. It's kind of a great story about how to think about happiness and joy in light of eternity. So go to Luke 16. Jesus is going to tell a parable, and if you don't understand, when Jesus tells parables, you have to understand that a parable is not a true story. Right? He's telling a story that he's crafted to make a point. Okay? So you have to be very careful how you interpret these parables because there's a main point to this thing. Let's get there. Luke 16, verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple, fine linen, and he feasted sumptuously every day. There's a word you don't use every day this week, sumptuously. Use that all week long. He feasted every day. He ate great food. He was rich. He had all the luxuries of this world. He had clothes that he didn't buy from Old Navy. If you buy from Old Navy, so do I. All right? It's all good. He had all of the luxuries. He had all the organic food. He had the mansions. He had the servants. He had, including the gate around his property to keep people out so nobody could steal anything. Verse 20. At his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered in sores, who desired to be fed what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, hold on. Don't gross out too much. Some of you are already grossing out over the licking of the sores thing. This is a dog-loving church. You people, I know you let your dogs kiss you all the time, so don't get grossed out on that. Here's the thing. They're describing this scene of this guy. He's so poor that he's positioned himself outside the rich man's house for a very specific reason. He's covered probably in a skin condition because he's not able to clean himself all the time. He's probably not wearing good clothes. He's probably really, really dirty. And he's having to beg. But you know what he's done? He's put himself outside the rich man's mansion. Why? We call it dumpster diving. We call it dumpster diving. It's as real today as it was back then. This is a very real scenario. I found one blogger, I love this, throw this picture up. I found this blogger that in Hollywood goes dumpster diving to help feed the poor. This is what he pulled off one afternoon. Look at those groceries. He said there's at least over $500 worth of groceries, clean, good food here. When you see this man sitting at this rich man, when you see the poor man sitting at the rich man's front gate, this is why. Because when we're rich, sometimes we just let our excess go. And this guy's not paying attention. And the poor man knows. He goes, look, if I have any ability to get a meal, I can go here and I can probably just get some good food. And at least I can feed myself. So he's outside the front gate. Jesus fast forwards the story now on us, verse 22. He says, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and he saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. So both men die. And we're not going to get into the details of all of this, right? What does it mean to be in Hades? What does hell look like? Here's what we know. Both men die, and there's a massive chasm between the two of them. One of them is living this life of luxury now, and it's the one who didn't live a life of luxury on earth. And for some reason, they can't bridge this chasm. And the guy that was poor, Lazarus, is in the presence of Abraham, in which we automatically would assume is in the presence of God. And he's apparently enjoying his life now. And the other one is separated, and he cannot cross that distance, and he's in torment. It says he's in torment. Verse 24, he calls out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. The rich man says, look, it's so bad. I'm in so much torment. that I just simply would like somebody to go touch their finger in some water and put a drop of water on my tongue. He didn't even ask for a bottle of Fiji water. He just said, look, I just need a drop. Just something. I'm suffering here. Forget the glass. Put your finger in some water and throw it on my tongue. Verse 25. But Abraham said, child, remember that you, in your lifetime, received your good things, and Lazarus, in like manner, bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. Now, let me stop you for just a second. Because it's easy to read this, like we just pulled it right out of the Luke. It's easy to read it and go, oh, this is just all about karma, right? The rich guy, he just was mean. The poor guy wasn't. So this is karma. This is the afterlife. This is what it looks like. That's not what's going on here. The rich man had rejected God in the story. The rich man had said no to God, to the ways of God, had not denied himself anything. The rich man had allowed himself to be completely happy, full of joy with everything that was on earth, and including his ability to withhold things for himself and not give other people joy. He wasn't going out there and intentionally feeding Lazarus. He didn't even want him at his table. He had a gate around his house. This is not about karma. This is about a rich man who rejected God and a very, very poor man who did not reject God. And the interesting thing is, in the story, you get that the rich man is incredibly happy. We assume, watch this, we assume that Lazarus was unhappy. But it never says that in the story. It just simply says that Lazarus was not experiencing the same caliber of life. The external circumstances for Lazarus were different. But you know, it never says he was unhappy. Now, I'm not saying he didn't suffer. Obviously, the man had lived through some hard things. But Lazarus had his hope grounded in something else. The external circumstances weren't what he based all of his happiness in. Paul goes on in Romans 5. He kind of unpacks this conversation just a little bit more. So I want to take you one more place to Romans 5, 1 and 2. Paul talks about this way. He says, therefore, since we've been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Since we've been justified, since we have been made acceptable to God, since we have been forgiven of our rebellion against God, since God has forgiven us our sins, right? Because of our faith in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, keep going, verse 2, through him, we have also obtained access, circle that phrase, we have obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we what? Say it, yep, we rejoice. There you go, you're coming along. I was worried you were going to sleep on me. We rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. We get happy. We have joy. When he says we've obtained access, think about it this way. In their culture, they would have thought about the king. We don't have kings. We don't have queens in our culture, so we don't tend to think like that. In their culture, to obtain access means that you could go into the king's inner chamber where the king lived, that was kept private just for him. Think about it this way. In our culture, where all the power rests in America, you would think about probably the White House. But beyond that, you'd probably think about the Oval Office, right? None of us, I don't think, my son-in-law works in D.C., and I still can't just walk up to the Oval Office yet. I'm waiting for that. We're going to see what happens. But you can't just walk in. You have to know somebody. You have to have a mediator. You have to have somebody who can take your hand, put the right badge on you, and take you into the Oval Office at the right time. Jesus gives you that. For everybody who puts their faith in that sacrifice, puts their confidence in that sacrifice, the hope of God, Jesus Christ, you have the ability now to approach God. You don't need me. I can't tell you how many times, and if you've done this, it's fine, but listen, just know when you ask me to pray for you, I want to pray for you. But you don't need me to pray for you above anybody else. Turn to your life group members, your community group members. Turn to the people around you, your family members. You don't need me to approach the throne of grace. You don't need your priest. You don't need a rabbi. Because of Jesus Christ, you can boldly go to that throne now. You have access to the power of the universe, the King of the universe. That's what you've been gifted through Jesus Christ. He is your focus. He should be your priority. And look what he says, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. We're going to be happy with that. We're going to be excited about that. We read that and we think hope, and most of us think, oh, that sounds like maybe we're not sure. We hope it happens. That's not what this word means. Paul means we rejoice in the hope. We have confidence in the hope. We are full of confidence that Jesus Christ has done what he said he would do. And that's what the rich man just discovered. The rich man just discovered that when you put all your hope, your confidence in the stuff of this life, the things that will make you happy, can bring an easy life, can make things easier for you, then you're going to discover that those things will not contribute to your hope, your happiness in the future, in eternity. Lazarus discovers that no matter what his earthly circumstances are at the time, that having his confidence in Christ, he actually can have joy too because of his future eternal state. God is concerned with your happiness. He really is concerned about your happiness, but it's because of where you anchor it. Write this down. Last thing. God wants me to discover, he wants you to discover happiness in Jesus, something the world cannot sustain. He wants you to discover this happiness that Jesus can give you because of what he promises you, because of what your hope has been put into, and the world can't come close to that. We're going to talk some about this more next week as we get into a new series, but the world can't come close to that. So let me tell you something that's a little unnerving. The things around you are going to fall apart. Your house is going to fall apart. Your relationships are probably some of them going to fall apart. You're going to lose people in your life. Right? People still die. People get sick. Things are going to be not happy in this life. But when the focus is on what Christ has done, right? When the focus is on what he's done for us, then we have some hope. Then we can have some joy, some happiness here because of what's coming, because of the promise of the future. I think the biggest danger we face, everybody in this room, I think everybody in your neighborhoods right now, the biggest danger we face is that life's pretty good. For all of us, life's just pretty good. Let's face it, anybody worried about not having a meal today? If you are, I will buy you a meal. But most of us are not worried where that next meal is coming from. Most of us are not worried at this point of where we're going to sleep tonight. Life's pretty good. And that's a dangerous place to be, because when life's pretty good, when life's pretty easy, when all of our happiness is coming from the external circumstances of this life, then we don't pay attention to what's coming down the road. Final question, where's your focus? Where's your focus at this morning? Where do you find joy? Where do you find happiness? It's not that God doesn't want you to be happy. It's also not that God wants everything to be about you. In understanding self-denial and placing your faith and confidence and trust in Jesus Christ, can you discover a new joy, a new happiness, even in the middle of some tough things? And what would that be? What does that look like? Where's your focus? What is there in your life that you need to give up? You need to commit to dying to again. Where you need to admit, hey, I put way more confidence in my stocks and my mutual funds. I put way more confidence in my place in life, my education. I put way more confidence in the kind of the nice little family that I've built. Can I tell you something? If your kids are young, get ready. Because they're going to hit an age and they're going to destroy that confidence. I loved it when our kids were young. They did what we told them, and they went where we drug them, and we could control everything, and it was so much fun. And you know why God lets them grow up? So you won't be confident anymore. That's what he's doing. Where do you find your joy? Where do you find your happiness? If you ground it in the person of Jesus Christ, can I tell you something? You can walk in all kinds of places and through all kinds of circumstances, and you can walk in a way that people are going to notice because you're going to walk differently. Where do you find your hope? Where do you find your confidence? Where do you find your joy? What is it you need to do this week? What area do you need to surrender again and say, God, I've been taking things back from you maybe. Maybe you're at that place where you need to go for the first time. God, I need to surrender, period. Like I've just never even understood this fully. Maybe you keep asking questions about God and you're to the point now where he keeps knocking on your heart a little bit, tugging at you, and you keep hearing the same message. And maybe it's time for somebody this morning to say, look, I need to just surrender. Like I've just never crossed that line of faith like this. This is not how I live. I get up every day and my focus is myself. And God's been saying, I need you to change your focus. I want you to surrender to something better. That what Christ did for you and I on the cross is so much better. And it allows us to walk in joy and confidence and happiness. And you're ready for that. Maybe you're ready to take that step this morning. If you are, all you need to do is tell him. Remember what we just said, you don't need me. I'd love to talk to you. But all you got to do is tell him. But by the way, when you tell him, then you need to tell somebody else. Because you don't grow until you get this stuff out there. What's your step this morning? Where do you need to refocus your life? Let me pray for us.